Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Eating at a Meeting. I am your host, Tracy Stuckrath, and I am excited to bring to you my guest today. This is Kris Reid. She is the Executive Director of Slow Food USA. She's a chef, a community builder, and a food advocate, and she has dedicated her career to creating stronger connections between farmers and makers and eaters. And so we're going to talk about today what slow food is and the mantra that slow food has, which is good, clean, fair food for all, and how we can create that community at the table. So welcome to the show, Kris.
Thanks, Tracy. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So you actually became the executive director of Slow Food USA in January of this year, right?
Yep.
So just 7 months into this, but you've been a huge advocate for a while.
Yes, definitely.
So for people who are listening, who don't know what slow food is, can you please share what the organization is and how it started? I know it, but.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So Slow Food USA is part of a international movement that is in 160 countries. Slow Food USA started in 1999 as a unique 501c3. And we are similar to what is considered a national territory. There's 14 of us, around the globe that are working for good, clean, fair food for all in an advocacy capacity, educating and inspiring, working towards change in policy around food and farm issues, and making sure that we're working together to preserve biological and cultural diversity. So nourishing that piece is an incredibly important aspect of slow food. The movement started in the 90s from Carlo Petrini, who really was raising awareness of the fast food culture coming into Italy. So this is the anti-fast food. This is slow food, which we say that our defense begins at the table. That if we are not focused on our relationship with food, that could have real impact across not just our community, but across our environment, our human health. There's several aspects of our humanity that are touched by food, and slow food is sort of the movement that brings people together towards that awareness. I think that is my favorite line of the manifesto of slow food, which is our defense begins at the table. And that's really the truth. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what does that mean? Like, explain that, go into that.
Yeah. So I like to say that we're the anti-convenience movement. There's manifestos written on several aspects of slow food, slow fish, slow wine. And I think there needs to be a slow mind manifesto. Because I think that's ultimately what we have to do is we have to shift the mindset that food is a spiritual center. It's not an economic center. It's not a convenience center. But we have switched our perception into that place because of how busy our lives become and how full our lives become and how quickly we have to be moving through this world to do all the things that we're trying to do. Food becomes less of a priority, but food is touching all of our healths. Food is touching our mental health. It's touching our relational health, our spiritual health, our economic health, our environment health. And so when we really think about our food choice and how every sip and every bite that we're taking has some sort of impact in our world, it changes the way that maybe you would source and maybe the way that you would cook and maybe the way that you would share. I don't think that our scientific instruments are there yet, but I'm sure at some point my daughter's 19 and a lot of the work that I've been doing for the last 20 years has really been in her honor to give her food choice and food autonomy when she gets older, right? If we don't protect what we have, then that won't be available. And our choice will be big box groceries and fast food restaurants, as our choice for food. So a lot of the work I've done is really in the name of my daughter. But, when I really think about how things are shifting culturally, how important it is for us to be transferring skills and knowledge around food and growing food and connecting people to food. Bringing people together around a table is an art at this point. We take that for granted sometimes, but it's really an art. And feeding people is an art. And so, all of this work that I've been focused on for the last 20 years has kind of come to a place culturally, I think that is we're sort of at an impasse. We were kind of having a brief conversation before we jumped on air just about, I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina. My daughter goes to UNCA, and so in Asheville. And so we were deeply impacted by Helene last year, which we're coming up on the anniversary of. And I'm from Los Angeles, where the Palisade fires were just a few months back. And so you think about all of these impacts that are happening globally, and like, what is our influence in that? And the truth is that people have been eating and drinking for many, many decades, and not thinking about the fact that is building a debt that will be repaid in lives and property at some point because of climate change. What we do eat and drink does affect the climate because of the impacts of growing food, and our waste stream management as well. So yeah, that was a whole lot, Tracy. I can just I can just ramble and ramble.
No, I love it. But it also reminded me, or triggered something from this morning, like, because the whole the dyes coming out of food, right? So there was a whole conversation on the Today Show of like making sure that Cheetos still made our fingers orange, right? And how they're replacing dyes and using beets and things to make the color, and found out from their consumers that they still want the Cheetos to make their I'm like, completely different conversation and completely different food stream, right? And how we think through that. And even the other day at the grocery store, I went to go buy some salmon, and I mean, I'm in the coast. I went to Publix to buy the salmon, and I wanted the wild caught. And he's like, we don't have it. We just have it farmed from Chile. And I pulled up my Monterey Bay Seafood Watch thing, and it's the red one saying avoid. And so I took home a steak instead.
Yeah, it's tough. And that food choice is part of what Slow Food's all about, is trying to inspire and educate, because I mean, the Monterey Bay Aquarium has done such a good job with that app. And there's several apps that have been created that try to drive people towards a food choice. But really what we need to get to, Tracy, is like, what's our relationship with food, right? Like, what's our relationship with the producer? What's our relationship in the full food cycle? And how can we participate in that full food cycle differently? While it's important to understand like things that can have really detrimental impacts for climate and for indigenous communities, and for, there's so many things that have to be considered. It makes it exhausting as an eater to buy things. Oh yeah. Right? Like, it's super exhausting to go to the grocery store, and you're trying to make all these choices, and there's all these apps that are telling you what to do and what not to do. And there's a lot of contradictory information. It's not that complicated. Food as a spiritual center is not that complicated. So I grow a lot of food, and I know that not everybody has a yard to do that. I live in a suburban area. I don't have a farm, but I grow a lot of food, and I have backyard chickens. And the reason that I do that is because I want to be connected to that piece. I want to eat out of my own yard. I want that freshness. I want the nutritional density of that food, which you cannot find otherwise, right? The moment that a food is harvested from its source, it starts to die, right? It begins the dying process. And so you start to off-gas essential parts of that are important for human health. And so the fresher your food can be, the better it is for your human health, right? So like, how do we get into a better relationship with fresher food and whole food? Again, like the whole movement is the inconvenience movement. It's not about convenience. It's not about opening that bag of Cheetos from the gas station and getting some calories in. It's about a conscious choice that you're making throughout your day to plan ahead and to eat in a way that is not just good for you, but good for the planet and other people. So, and that's tough, right? It's exhausting. Yeah. Again, you can go down a rabbit hole, and trust me, like 20 years ago when I was pregnant and trying to figure out what am I supposed to eat as a pregnant chef. And I started to be exposed to these ideas around the GMO products and around all of the problematic pieces of our food system, which you're not exposed to actually as a chef. Really, most chefs aren't, right? Your job as a chef is to come in and source and cook and be on target for your numbers, and that holistic piece of food, and the fact that we're touching the inside of people's bodies, and that we're practicing this spiritual practice as a chef, is thrown out completely. It's like, are you making your numbers? Are you doing it on time? Can you make me money, and how fast can you do it? That's the whole name of the game, right? So we don't learn about that, or a lot of people don't learn about that in their early culinary careers. And so when I was pregnant, it became this sort of focal point that really brought me to slow food. That's what brought me to this organization, was kind of going down this rabbit hole with GMO. And, 10 years later, I had been, involved in the chapter here in Charlotte. I had been a delegate to Terra Madre in Italy in 2010. So I fully immersed myself into this world. And by fully immersing yourself into this world, while I do understand there are limitations for people that have 2 jobs, 3 jobs, 3 kids. I mean, there's a lot of restrictions that don't make what I do and how I live easy to do, right? But it is something that's attainable if the desire is there. And the desire to have a relationship with your growers, to have a relationship with what you grow, to be involved in a community garden or a school garden. Those are all choices that I'm making. I don't make the choice to be in front of the TV, right? And that's a choice, and there's no judgment there. If that's how you relax, I don't relax. I don't have a television.
Oh, wow.
We watch a movie on the computer screen, but I've not had cable, in 30 years. My whole life is built around community and doing, and that's where I find my enjoyment. And so in part of that enjoyment is being in this food space. And so the time off that I have is spent in food. When I'm not working, I'm pickling, I'm fermenting, I'm growing, I'm giving, I'm cooking. My whole world is around food. And I know that that's not for everyone, right? So, but what is for everybody is a choice on what you're eating today and the impact it can have in our community and our environment and your human health tomorrow. And that choice is really simple. It's just to be working with whole food, to be working with whole product, whole ingredient, and processing that in a way that is healthy to you and healthy to others, and respectful of our environment. So not an app is going to solve that problem for you.
Right. No. Yeah. And when the seafood market is closed, and that's what you've got. Yeah. So, but planning ahead. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
It's a little disconnecting too, for a lot of people to move into sort of the slow food mentality, because a lot of the slow food mentality is not, it's based in seasonality, right? What I eat when we finish this call, I'm going to go have my first meal of the day. And what is on that plate is going to represent time and place. It's going to represent this region, September 10th, because of what's on my plate. And that's not a lot of the time how people are seeing their food, right?
Right.
But I think if we can start to encourage people to make 1 or 2 small choices a week in terms of how they're purchasing or how they're participating in the food stream, that can make a huge difference, for all of us.
Right. Exactly. I just want to throw this up here. Tiffany, welcome to the show. She said, good morning, good afternoon. Hello to you. So I'm in Eastern North Carolina, and my farmer's market, I don't grow vegetables in my yard because we have bears and raccoons and rabbits that knock down everything that you possibly can have. But I do buy from the local farmer's market. There's a handful, there's only probably a handful of people that are growing their own vegetables in New Bern. And one is for personal reasons, not been there for a couple of months. Another one only comes on Tuesdays, and we do buy our pork from them. They raise pigs, and so we get our sausages fresh from them. But if you're not in an environment that has that you only have the Publix or the Food Lion or whatever grocery store that is Albertsons or whatever that's near you, and we don't know where that local farmer is from. We don't know a local farmer. I mean, and we can't pull it up in the telephone book anymore. How do we do that?
I mean, again, I'm just going to say the first choice is whole food. Right. So if you're at a grocery store, the first choice would be whole food. That's where a lot of your potential nutrition is going to come from, but also fresh frozen food. A lot of frozen food is harvested at peak and it's flash frozen. So you're trapping the nutrient density, right? So it's kind of a combination of those two things, understanding sort of maybe what's regional and understanding the cool labeling laws and understanding the country of origin, right? If something's coming from another country, is that transit time probably longer maybe than something that's a North Carolina grown product for you? So you go to the food line and you say, it says North Carolina eggplant. Well, that's probably going to be a little bit fresher than something that comes from another country, for example. Now, of course, transit systems are really elaborate, and the logistics behind that provide just incredible opportunity for bringing fresh food to market. So don't misunderstand what I'm saying, because I think fresh food or fresh frozen food is better than processed food is my claim here, right? Yep. Like it's better for a lot of reasons. Nutritionally, it's going to be better for you. The act of processing that food, again, as a spiritual center of food, is impactful and important. And likely, if you're cooking, you're probably sharing, right? You're having somebody else that meal versus you get that pack of Cheetos at the gas station. It's an individual portion, right? We're not sharing that. It's not communal.
Well, you probably should be, because it's 4 portions.
Well, you probably should be. But what I'm saying is the food package is not a vehicle of sharing for a lot of that product, right? Like it's an individual portion versus having an opportunity to share a meal with others. So I would say start with whole food. Yeah, of course, not everyone's going to be able to go to a farmer's market. Not everyone's going to be able to buy local. I go to the grocery store. I buy food that's not local. But my first choice is fresh food. I don't have processed food in my house. It's one of my rules. So I don't have chips, or I just don't have that stuff. If I have cereal, it's usually like a whole grain cereal that I buy once in a while when my daughter's home from school. But we've never been a processed food house, right? Like even my snacks on my bar area are whole fruits that are dried. So I'm not in nuts, that's the kind of snacky type things that we have in the house. But it's just the choice to move towards the whole food first. I think, Tracy, is like really what people need to be thinking about, because in that process, you are handling the food, you are processing the food, you're sharing the food more than likely with others. And that's all part of the full food cycle, and also the blueprint for humanity. I think that slow food is moving towards, right? Again, the defense begins at the table. We're not opening up a pack of Cheetos to sit down at a table. But if we cook a meal, we're probably going to spend time to put it on a plate and sit down and eat it. Right. So it's the practice of food, being in the practice of food.
Well, slow food's been around for 27 years, right?
Yeah.
So, and it's still not to that point of like, let's do this.
Sure.
And I think it makes, with what's going on in the US right now, it elevates the level and the need for this so much more. So how many chapters does the USA have for slow food? And how is the message of slow food getting communicated across?
Sure. Yeah. So you're right. I don't think the brand is as strong as it could be. We depend a lot in the advocacy of our members to share this work with others, just like you would share a meal. And so the grassroots effort is really designed to amplify the local issues, to amplify the national issues, to bring people together around those issues. Politically, things are very fraught. We have a moment in time right now where slow food can really be a solution for so many pieces, right? Like we went through COVID and we had this isolation period. We came up against a political period that has really caused deep division in our country. And food can be something that mends that divide or can shorten that divide between people, right? And slow food can be part of that. Having that conversation around good, clean, fair food for all is not a political conversation in its nature, right? When we talk about like what is good, delicious drives, right? We don't need to argue that. There's nothing to argue there. Clean, obviously, clean is better. There's scientifically, it's demonstrated, it's proven it's better for the environment, it's better for our human health. There's nothing to argue about there. And I don't think that there's much to argue about when it comes to fair. We're seeing a real mistreatment of people and product right now, right? Not just people, but animals and product across the board. There's a lot of mistreatment happening. And I don't think that's political to say that. I think there's just a reality there. And so food, local food, conversations can help to amplify those stories and help bring people closer to understand why these food purchases and how we're handling food are so important in this entire ecosystem. In terms of the brand of slow food, as a national organization, we have 89 registered chapters. I would say 45 are really active. And those are across the country. You can go to our website and find where the chapters are. As you mentioned, you don't have a chapter near you. The Charlotte chapter where I live is defunct. And so they're working to bring that back. Now, you want to go to slowfoodusa.org, but you can use this website that will probably take you to as well, slowfoodusa.org. But that website will likely land on our page as well, Tracy. So, but I would say, the challenging part of slow food is like we're not going to spend our resources on heavy layers of marketing. We're dependent on the community to be the vehicle of marketing, right? And so that's why having this time with you is so important. And I thank you for it, because it gives us an opportunity to share sort of this idea of ethos and values around slow food ethos and values. And to understand that, humans are part of a sustainable solution and part of a sustainable equation. We don't really think about that sometimes, right? Like we're part of the equation when it comes to sustainability. When we think about our human energy and our human capacity and our mental health and our spiritual health, all of these things to be considered within the sustainable equation, right? Of how we're moving forward into the future, and how can food be the vehicle to help us reconcile that. That's what slow food, the brand is, right? So how do you market that? You don't, right? It's not going to be something that's going to be thrown onto a package. Now in Europe, you see the brand is very strong, and they have very strong laws and labeling laws around food that are much different than in America, right? So we're working against a system that's already established here culturally in terms of what people understand clean food to be.
Right. Yeah.
So it makes it a little harder.
It does. So let's on that word, because that is a word too that a lot of people say, oh, I eat clean. And what does that definition mean? And it gets a bad rap sometimes.
Sure.
So what, in the context of slow food, what does clean mean?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so, really our goal is to be chemical free, herbicide free, GMO free. Our goal is to provide food in its purest and most natural place. So, that's tough because a lot of our food is grown in America in a system which is based in the sale of chemicals. To buy the seed, you have to buy the chemical concoctions that go with those seeds. It's not that the seeds are expensive, it's that all the implements that go into raising that product and the seeds are dependent on having to have a robust yield are chemical based. So, a lot of smaller growers, a lot of smaller growers don't have that capacity, right? For those implements, they don't have that capacity. They're growing differently. And some people will call that regenerative farming. Some people call that agroecology. There's all these different words that we're like throwing into the mix, Right. Agroecological is a really big, hot topic right now. But ultimately this is why it's important to have a relationship with the food. So whether that's with the grower, and again, lots of barriers, we've already talked about that, lots of barriers to figuring that out, or to have a relationship with food in the grocery store to understand, like, what is the difference between this broccoli that's organic and this broccoli that's not? Is it worth $4 a head to buy this broccoli that's organic? And that becomes a very complicated equation for me, because I'll look at it and say, okay, well, let's see, it's cooler temperatures right now. This is a North Carolina based product. It's not organic, but to me, they're not going to be spraying things in cooler temperatures, right? There's nothing to spray. The pests don't exist. So like having this constant awareness around that helps me to make those food purchases different. But clean is ultimately without chemical. We don't want to be using chemicals on food, and we certainly don't want to be ingesting them. So that's really the simplest way I can say it. We don't need to use the word organic necessarily, but that would be something that general consumers would understand probably a little better.
Well, and that reminds me, I think it was last week I saw somebody's post. I don't even know who it was. And they said, well, instead of calling it organic, why don't we call it a carrot? And then here's the carrot with chemicals on it.
Yeah.
Right. So do it the opposite way, right?
Yeah.
Call out the
lobbyists would never allow that.
No, exactly. Money. Yeah. Yeah.
The lobbyists will never allow that. And so, and that's who's really that, there's a saying at Slow Food years ago that is, food equals freedom, right? Like if we have control and we have food sovereignty, we have freedom. And again, going back to what I said earlier about my daughter, being 20 and a lot of this work being around and in her name is for me, that autonomy and that choice and that freedom. And how can you achieve food sovereignty where you are? I understand that you can't grow, that sometimes there's environments in which are not, in the middle of the desert. I'm from Southern California, right? We weren't growing some massive garden in Southern California, right? So, but to have a relationship with somebody who is growing, or to have a relationship with a food hub, or to create a relationship with a gleaning group.
Explain that.
Gleaners. So Society of St. Andrews is a great one here regionally. But there's lots of different gleaning organizations that will go into fields after the first pick, and they'll glean what's left. And that product typically will go to like a food pantry or somewhere else in the food stream. But having a relationship with these people provides an opportunity, again, to have a relationship with the food and have access to food if food affordability is a problem. Right. So these organizations exist all around the country. I actually would love for Slow Food to have a map of those groups so that we can better connect people to them. I would love to see Slow Food become a resource center. It once was an amazing resource center. And Slow Food's done a lot of really good work over the last couple of decades. But I think that we're getting back to this place where we need to provide these resources. I mean, this is a lot of your questioning, and I think it's a lot of the interest of general consumers is like, well, like I understand I need to eat different, but how? Right.
Yeah.
Where are the resources? And so everyone's like going to these apps and ChatGPT that are being directed by like the machine versus the relationship. And so I would love for Slow Food to be a resource center of relationships and help people find these sources that they need to make good choices.
And I don't even remember the website that I used to go to just like find my local farmer or find my local farmer's market, right? And it was upkept by those farmers. And so if the farmer doesn't know that website's there to put it up, to put their information up there. So, it's
a noisy place, right? It's like a super noisy environment for farmers, for consumers. I mean, this is like the great part of technology and the like sort of the not great part of technology and social media is that it's just so noisy. I mean, back to your point of like, why is Slow Food's brand not as strong here as it is in Europe? I mean, that's one of the reasons, right? Obviously, we're not spending millions of dollars on ad campaigns to compete against these massive food companies who are pushing out this greenwashing garbage to most people. But, that's it right there. I mean, it's just a loud, noisy place. And so where do you find connectivity there? Well, you find it around the table. Again, our defense begins at the table. And does that grow a movement quickly? No, it's slow. It's very slow. But being together around the table or having conversations like this is where we can, share and exchange and create resources for each other.
So, okay. So you're a chef, and restaurant, you did restaurant and you've done catering, right?
I've done mostly farm to institution. That's what my career was based on. So, most of my chef career in North Carolina was spent in the farm to institution space. So creating big purchasing opportunities for farms and an outlet for a lot of that local food to come through, whether it's hotels, conferences, retirement communities. That's a lot of the work that I've done in North Carolina.
Well, and which reminds me too, and how, because my question, I mean, we're talking about eating at a meeting, right? Or we're on the show eating at a meeting. There's a chef that used to work at the Georgia International Conference Center in Atlanta, and now he's at Emory, at least the last time I checked. And when I listened to him speak at Cater Source, he talked about exactly what this is. And he helped, he's like, to one farmer, he's like, you can't bring your food to me in your car, right? But he bought so much, it helped him figure out how to do that.
Yeah.
But ended up helping him, giving him so much business, he was able to buy his own refrigerated truck, right? Amazing. And so, with that mentality, right, thinking through that, but there's so many group purchasing contracts from these big hotels and convention centers. Some of them, their hands are tied for me to say, hey, I want you to go buy from the local farmer, from Beaufort Organics that I know here, right? And Stephen's not big enough to, go feed enough people at the Georgia International Convention Center, but he's able to at least supplement and do some things, So how do we, from this institution side, this meeting side, really push this to say, hey, we want this from the Marriotts, the Hyatts, the Sodexos, and yeah. Yeah,
I would say that we vote with our dollar, right? And we use our voice to advocate. And so if what drives decisions is money, and losing a contract for a hotel is because they will refuse to source anything locally, there's a good chance that is your moment. That is your entry point to create a different outcome with your voice and with your dollar, is to demand, how do you encourage these institutions to move to a different sourcing model, even if it's one-off? And it's possible, because I've been doing it for 18 years for Carolina Farm Stewardship Association. They're at a different hotel or conference center for their Sustainable Ag Conference every year. And for many, many years now, I've done all of their menu planning and their sourcing and work with the hotel staff to bring that product in. And it's a lot different now than it used to be, even, 10 years ago. There's a lot more local food aggregation happening that's servicing those large accounts. And so while, yes, an account is bound by their broadliner contract, there is concessions there by percentage that they can purchase outside of that contract agreement. And so understanding that if you're planning a meeting or a conference, that yes, of course they have a broadliner contract, and they'll say, oh no, we can't do any sourcing outside of our contract. Our contract doesn't allow that. The truth is there's always a concession there. There's always the capacity to order outside of that contract. The reason that people don't hire or don't want to purchase outside of contract is complicated, but it has to do with invoicing, inventory, control of the product, because it might not be a uniform product they're used to getting in. And so you're dealing with the human resource aspect and training aspect to dealing with different food that's not part of your order guide or part of your normal menu. But all of these things with the right collaborators can be overcome. Like this is not something that I have ever seen a problem doing in the last 2 decades of food sourcing for conferences that want sustainable products in their conference. It's very hard to have a sustainable ag conference and serve commodity food.
Right, exactly. Well, and I saw that when I did events and attended Georgia Organics conferences. So yeah. But it also reminds me of Brian Stapleton. Do you know Brian Stapleton? He used to work at Carolina Inn in Pebble Hill. But during COVID, he said, Chrissy, they're not out of butter. They're only out of the butter that they're supposed to buy. Yeah. Under their contract. So, yeah.
But this goes back to what we already kind of talked about, like our defense begins at the table. And I keep on saying that because that's actually the line in the manifesto. But what that's really saying is our defense begins in relationship, with others, right? So when we're in relationship with others, that is our opportunity to collaborate and start to move the needle on change. I think that with all the problems that we're dealing with, socially, economically, politically, I think that one thing that we can we can have hope for is that people will continue to be the spark of change, right? That inspiration will continue to innovate movement forward if the consumer demands it. If the consumer is saying, we don't want that commodity food, we don't want that pesticide laden food, we don't want that dead energy food, we want vibrant, alive, healthy, nutritious food. And if you don't provide it, we'll find another source that will. Well, again, money is what's driving, right? Those businesses, but delicious is what's driving most of us as consumers, right? So if we're demanding deliciousness, and deliciousness for me equals clean, fair food, right? How do we use our influence and our voice to advocate for that change for that institution? And a lot of that is just saying like, hey, this is just not a community that's going to appreciate the food that you have on your catering menu. When we go in for the Sustainable Ag Conference, on their catering menus, they'll have like fresh fruit and muffins. Not happening. These farmers want to see their food on these menus. There's no fresh food during the Sustainable Ag Conference season because it happens late in the year. So the only fresh fruit that I'm able to get is apples, and it's going to go into cobbler, or, or it was preserved earlier in the year by another vendor. But what I'm saying is if we're really eating our season, right? And we are encouraging a conference to like be with us in the seasonality of the food and to work with local growers. If there's money on the table, they will likely make that choice to keep your business and working with a local aggregate if you bring solution to them, right? Yeah.
Well, I have my Nelson's blueberries in the freezer, right?
Very nice. Yes.
Yep. I mean, I went and bought my flat of it for $30, and I put them in the pints in the freezer, and that's what I've been eating. Yeah.
Amazing. Yes.
Yeah.
I wish I still had blueberries left. I grow blueberries, but we ran through them pretty quickly this year. They were great.
Oh,
yeah.
Don't let me near your blueberry bushes because you'd be running
I got lots of figs though. If anybody needs figs.
Oh, I will come. I will come.
Oh my God, I have so many. It was a bumper year for fig production this year. I had neighbors and everybody asking people to just come pick because I felt so bad watching the fruit fall to the ground because I couldn't deal with the amount of it. Yeah.
Wow.
This is a lot. Yeah.
Stephen from Beaufort County Organics here has a fig tree, and he's like, come when I need to go do that this weekend.
Yeah. Because it happens so quickly, right?
Yeah.
Like the singularity of the experience is what makes it special. And it's very singular, these seasons. They're very short and precious. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So you just did an event, campaign, and now it's escaping my brain.
The Joyful Dinner Series.
The Joyful Dinner Series. And then you also have Terra Madre.
Yes.
Americas. So can you talk about what those two programs, the purpose behind them, and what you hope to gain out of them?
Absolutely. So Joyful Dinner Series, we did last month. And the idea, again, the idea for me is to bring people together around a table. I just feel like this is so important and we take it for granted. I think that I got out of the habit during the period of COVID, having people over and having dinners or going to other people's house for a potluck, right? We just kind of got out of this. We got into this sort of isolation mode. And then with what happened politically over the last couple of years, there's just been this very, very serious divide that I really feel can be healed through bringing people together around food. And so the Joyful Dinner Series was really about that. How do we combat loneliness and how do we bring people together to talk about good, clean, fair food and what that means for communities and how they can participate in that, right? And so the Joyful Dinner was all about that. And so we had, just over 60 dinners nationally. Individuals signed up and businesses signed up. Businesses that signed up become business members. And my hope with the business membership is to really continue the conversation about like, what does it mean to be sustainable, to practice sustainable practices in your business, regardless of the kind of business that is. What does that mean? And how do we cash flow that, right? Because the first rule of a sustainable business is to be in business. So a lot of sustainable practices can be very expensive. And if you don't have the consumer base to support those practices, you might not be able to execute on a lot of them, right? So having conversations around that is also why I did the Joyful Dinner and targeted businesses to create this cohort of businesses that can now have conversations. And so that was the Joyful Dinner Series. We will be doing it again. Okay. I thought that for the first round, it was I thought it was remarkable to hear of all the great stories that were coming out of the community that were having these dinners. So
And didn't Hackney, Chef Jamie do one?
He did. Yes,
Yeah.
he did. Yes, I was so grateful. Yeah, thanks for calling him out on that.
Yeah.
And if I were closer, if I were in your region, I would have been able to make that one. We had a couple here in Charlotte at Stoke and at 300 East as well. So I was able to go to those dinners because they're more local to me. But yes, certainly would love to see this program really expand across the United States and allow businesses to engage with slow food through that entry point. To drive ethos and value systems of the organization into their business. So that's Joyful Dinner. And then Terra Madre Americas is actually not Slow Food USA's event. That's a Slow Food International event. And that's happening on the off years of Terra Madre, which happens in Italy. So on the off years that Italy's not happening, Terra Madre Americas will happen in Sacramento. Sacramento is, Visit Sac is rebranding the city as the farm to fork capital of the country. And so they have been a eager host of this event. And this will be the first real year. I think they had like a little pilot year last May, not this May. And so this is the first real sort of showcase of slow food community coming together in Sacramento. So we have at our booth space 12 chapters that are going to be activated and 15 or 16 presenters over the course of a couple of days, sharing their stories, sharing their knowledge, and providing a space for people to be together. I think that that's ultimately trying to create a space. Terra Madre Americas is really creating a space, I feel like, for celebrating culture and tradition and bringing people together. And so I think that that's what is forming at this point, and I'm really excited about it. They're expecting it to be a huge crowd. It is a free event. There are components which you pay for, tasting components that you can pay for, but overall the event is free. So open to the public and anyone is welcome to join us.
Well, and I went to Turin, Italy for I went in 16 and 18. And 16 was the first time they did it outside and like 1 million people were there. And it's mind blowing. And I love the fact that you said the cultural aspect of it, because there's people from all over the world showcasing their indigenous foods and their, indigenous practices around food celebrations and how do you bring people to the table. And it was remarkable to meet all those people. And then also I love the fact that it was the first time that I had also seen the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. And I think that was in 2018, but how each of those countries and those farmers and those other people, other participants were talking about, how they're doing that. And it's a remarkable, opportunity to learn about different food cultures, which we especially need right now.
Yes.
Right.
No, definitely. And I think that that's something that's one of the biggest and most impactful things of going to Turin, Italy in 2010 as a delegate was meeting farmers from other countries. And there's a lot of seed sharing. I actually brought seed home and have grown some of the product even since then, which is really beautiful, right? And it's not encouraged that you take seeds from country to country, by the way. Don't tell anybody that I told you to do that. But we did bring some home from some of the farmers that we met there, and we were able to grow some squashes and some different products, which was super cool. And so, yeah, definitely being able to celebrate other people's growing traditions is something that's very like human about that and really connecting about that. So yes, it's a very special event.
Well, and even at and I like going back to the local thing, and this is Slow Foods exhibit at the World's Fair that was in Milan when I went, and they had a whole presentation on apples. Like here are the hundreds of different types of apples that are around the world versus the Red Delicious, right?
Yeah.
Like, and it makes you really appreciate and like, oh my gosh, there's more than this kind of apple. I didn't know that.
But there won't be if we don't eat it, right? We got to eat it to save it, right? We got to eat at the restaurant to save the restaurant. We got to eat from the farmer to save the farm. We got to eat the product if we want to see it, right? We got to eat it to save it. But you're right. There's thousands of varieties of apples. Actually, North Carolina, Lee Calhoun is I think, I'm not sure if Lee's still with us, but he wrote a book, a heritage apple book in North Carolina. And I met him at Horn Creek, which is a orchard here in North Carolina that is working to save apples. There's 2 of each variety at this. Yeah, very cool. It's not, I don't think it's open to the public anymore, but you can make an appointment to go and visit Horn Creek. And so, but Lee, as an apple expert, inspired a dinner that I did many years ago, which was an apple feast where we had 7 chefs use 7 different varieties of apples for 7 different courses. And it was super fun. Yeah, it was super fun to showcase texture, taste, color, water content, how it impacts a dish, and talk about that. I know it's sort of like geeking out for some people who aren't like super into food. But this is sort of like dreamy for me.
Well, and it reminds me of the chef, and I'm not gonna try to say his name because I'll mutilate it, but he's from Europe, and he's been doing posts on LinkedIn. Like, here are 7 to 10 different renditions of the same food. Like, here it is pickled, here it is, and it's like, even like the cauliflower, like we're missing out on the stems. Like, we throw those stems away. And this is what you could do with them instead of, well,
that's like the same with broccoli, right? Like when you grow broccoli, like the broccoli leaves are fantastic, right? Sweet potato leaves are amazing. And a lot of Asian cultures use sweet potato leaves, but we don't see that culturally in our food and our cuisine in America necessarily, from a broad standpoint, from a consumer standpoint. But there's all different kinds of aspects of food that we don't eat because they're not profitable, right, for the farms or for the system to make money, right? And that's, I think, part of that system that makes money on food. A lot of these foods have been genetically, altered and manipulated to take on a lot of water weight, right? Because weight is where the money is. Things are sold by pounds. Okay, so you see over the course of many decades, foods getting bigger and more water. That equals higher weight, higher yield, higher margin profit, right? And so when we build in more water, we are affecting the flavor of things. So when you have like an heirloom product or a heritage breed product, you see a difference in flavor because it hasn't been manipulated to take on something that's not meant to be there. And for the sake of a greasy buck, really.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Oh, there's so much to learn and so much to do. I so appreciate you. I do have 5 rapid fire questions real quick for you.
Sure.
What's your favorite ingredient you can't live without in your kitchen?
I'm just like a carrot fanatic. I know that sounds so weird, but like, I'm just an absolute carrot fanatic. I have like I'm looking over my garden right now. I have 2 different patches of carrots started. I grow carrots. I ferment carrots. I pickle carrots. I use carrots and like for mirepoix, for any recipe. I mean, pretty much carrots go into everything that I do. So I would say I would have a really hard time living without carrots.
Okay, awesome. You need to come to New Bern, and Cypress Hall Restaurant has a What's Up Doc. They have a cocktail called the What's Up Doc, and I get it as a non-alcoholic version of it, but it's my favorite, and it's got a jalapeno on it, and
love that.
Really yummy. Yeah,
carrots are so underrated.
They are. Yeah, they're really good. Okay, one food memory that instantly brings you joy.
Oh gosh, I immediately went to working in a garden. In 2010 or 11, I was volunteering at a alcohol, drug, and it was a drug and alcohol rehabilitation center, and they had a greenhouse there that wasn't in use and a garden that was overgrown. And I asked if I could grow food in that space. And they said, well, what are you going to do with it? And I was like, well, I'm going to feed these sick people here. And so they were like, okay, fine. And so I got some farmers to come together to give me seeds and soil. And we planted all these tomatoes, and I sold them all. And that's what we used to start the garden. And as soon as I started the garden, they started sending out some residents to help me in the garden space. And one day I had this woman come out and she said, hey, they sent me out here and I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And I said, well, go pick those peas along the fence. And so she went over and she was just standing there looking at the fence. And I said, what's the problem? She goes, I don't know what you want me to do. And I said, okay, well, just like drop on your knees, look behind the leaves. There's these peas, pick them off, put them in the bowl. I said, and try one. She says, oh no, I don't want to eat it. It's not cooked. I was like, that's okay. We don't spray anything on this garden. It's totally safe. And so she takes a bite into this. It's like this moment where, I don't know if you saw the movie Ratatouille, where the food critic takes the bite of Ratatouille and he falls back into this vortex of time. And he's like at the table and his mother's like patting him on the back. But something happened to her and she kind of fell away from me for a minute. And when she came back, she was crying and she's like, oh my God, I used to pick these with my grandmother. And so she had this like food memory that was triggered by taste, right? Taste drives. And she remembers this moment before her life went sideways, right? And and this very pure, very, very real moment with food. Yeah. So I would say that brings me so much joy.
As it should. That's fantastic. Okay. If you could invite any 3 people, past or present, to a slow food dinner, who would they be?
Oh gosh. Well, I would love to hang out with Carla Petrini again. We had such a beautiful exchange once, and I would so enjoy sitting down with him for a slow food meal. And I always appreciate so much my friend Tom Duncan, who's been a great mentor to me, and we enjoy lots of food together. But I would say putting together at the table Carla Petrini, Tom Duncan, and I think that I would probably throw my Nana into that mix. My Nana's passed, and she came from England and married into a Mexican family in Southern California. And so our culinary traditions in my family are Mexican cuisine with this very strange sort of like English flair. So there's lots of gravy, but it's anyways. So I would say, I would bring my Nana together with Carla Petrini and Tom.
That would be a fun dinner. Okay. Most underrated local food or farmer you think that deserves the spotlight?
Oh gosh, there's so many. Yeah. I wouldn't be able to name just one. There's so many people that have dedicated their lives to this work, chefs and farmers. And I think that we really take that for granted when we walk into restaurants and we eat sometimes, or when we go to the farmer's market and we see food on tables, or we go to the grocery store and we see food on shelves. We don't realize that people have dedicated their entire life to this work, that it's their craft. And that never escapes me. I'm constantly aware of that. So I couldn't name one, because I don't think that we value it as a culture overall. I think that there's so much talent and so much skill that needs to be transferred right now so that we can hold on to these foodways. It would be impossible for me to just name one person.
That's amazing. All right. And lastly, in one word, what does community taste like to you?
Love, safe, inclusive.
Yep.
I would say that's what to me community is. I do an open house every Saturday at my house to make a space for people to be. If they want a hug or they just want to have a conversation. And so I would say community, it tastes like love. And we need a lot more of that resonating.
Yeah, we do. All right. Tiffany popped in here and said, thank you so much, Tiffany, for being here with the whole time with us. But I don't know what the it's not was related to, but love you that you love carrots. You're in good company. So thank you. Kris, thank you so much.
Absolutely. It's been great. Thanks for taking time to chat.
You're welcome.
I ramble a little bit, but
oh no, I love it.
Yeah, I'm very much about making spaces for people to enjoy good meals and be together. And if we want to see a change in this world, we're going to have to push energy out in that looks different than what we currently are experiencing. And so I just implore everyone to do that and to do it through food. It's our human blueprint for the future if we want to see a sustainable world.
Thank you. We're going to end on that.
Awesome.
Next week, everybody, thank you for tuning in today. And if you're watching it on the replay, please feel free to ask questions and I'll send them to Kris to answer if you want. Next week, I have Amy Graves, who is the author of the book, The Hidden Consumer, and learning more about her corn allergy and what she's found in the research of that. So until then, stay safe and eat well. And thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Tracy.
Thanks, Kris.